Oh my God. So this is going to be incredible. Today on the Converge podcast, I have the honor of talking with Gurvais Grigg. Gurvais, welcome to the Converge
Thank,
podcast.
thanks, John. It's good to be here.
Oh man, what a pleasure this is. And we've got so much cool stuff to dive into today. We had to stop from talking too much on the prep because we wanted to keep it suspenseful. So we're gonna get right into it. First, I want to start with your background because I think that sets the whole narrative of what we're about to talk about, who you are, what you do, and what you've done. So lay it on us.
Right. Well, John, it's a pleasure to be with you today, and it's great to talk with you and your members. My name is Gurvais Grigg. I'm a retired FBI agent, 23 years. Joined the bureau I was a stock and bond broker before I joined the bureau, and went out to West Texas, my first office in El Paso, and like any good FBI agent, learned how to investigate bank robberies and violent crime and kidnappings and transnational theft. But it wasn't long before found my way into white collar healthcare fraud, money laundering, and the like, and began teaching myself cyber. Back in the 90s, we had cyber cases, but they weren't like they are today. And so started teaching myself to code and looking at how technology could solve large
Wow.
record intensive investigations. And that sort of set the course for the remainder
While
of
you
my
were at the
career.
FBI, while you were at the FBI, you learned to code?
I did. I went out and bought
Wow.
myself books and just started learning because we had these cases where we just had tons of
What
information and
era of
data.
the internet was this when you started to code? Like talk me through the
Like
timeless stuff.
97,
Oh
like
wow, so
97.
early in the internet. So you
Yes,
were you
yes,
were early internet FBI. How cool.
yeah.
So you started writing. So what did you write that I'm gonna go a little nerd out a little bit. What did your first what did you write stuff in and what
Well,
languages and what did you
this will
use?
really date you, but in college, I learned how to program in Fortran
Okay.
originally, right? So I mean, that's like way back. But we started building databases, SQL, right? And we were working these cases, and I realized that a lot of the data we were getting from financial institutions, telecoms, insurance companies were printouts. And I could tell, well, this is coming out of a digital information system. So I started contacting them and saying, hey, could we get this data electronically? Because we were going to great effort in those days to convert OCR. And of course, that always comes with input errors and cleanup and spreadsheet manipulation. And they said, yeah, we could do that, but nobody ever asked for it that way. I said, well, I'm asking for it that way. And let me figure out how. So I went out, got some books on coding and creating
Oh
databases.
man,
And
this is awesome. This is awesome. So you were you had to be one of the first people in government as far as the Justice Department to do this type of to lead this type of effort. You must have led it.
Well, it was definitely early days, and pioneered some advanced data exploitation techniques. And the next thing you know, as a junior agent, I'm being sent all around the country to teach other people how to do it. Particularly, would write
Wow.
scripts that they then could apply against data. If they configured the data a certain way, wrote shell databases that they could use, and it was a lot of fun. And what I didn't realize is this was all for healthcare fraud, financial crimes. Then 9/11 happens, and we become deeply concerned about the illicit movement of money in support of counterterrorism. And so I was contacted and asked if I would come back to headquarters and help work with the terrorist financing operations section that we created and apply these same techniques to counterterrorism. And that was an exciting time.
Oh my, I cannot even imagine how exciting that was. I mean, the transformations that you guys had to go through there in the because that was kind of like, mid 2000s, right? When technology and the web was just starting to take off and find its footing and stuff was transforming so fast.
Yes.
Wow, what a crazy, crazy time. So fast forward, you did all this really crazy stuff. You you pioneered all this stuff. And now we get into kind of how we met, which is
Yep.
you're now the CTO of a little company called Chainalysis. So
That's
tell us
right.
what you do at Chainalysis.
Great. Yeah, I'm the Chief Technology Officer for our public sector efforts here at Chainalysis. And my job is to work with public sector partners here in the US and around the world to help them with their digital strategy implementation. How can they leverage blockchain intelligence to accomplish their missions? I specifically, as you would imagine, work with law enforcement in particular. and national security agencies to help them implement these digital asset strategies. I mean, as you heard from my background, I love investigations. I love bringing technology to bear. And so I knew when it came time to retire, I wanted to stay in support of public service. I wanted to do financial investigations. And I looked at the technologies that were going to shape the 21st century. AI and blockchain came right to the forefront. So the chance to be CTO for the leading blockchain analytic firm was just too great an opportunity to pass up. I met with Jonathan Levin, one of our co-founders, now our CEO. After the second meeting, I said, okay, Jonathan, I'm all in. How do we make this happen? And I've been now with Chain for 4 years.
Man, that's what an incredible story to get from just all the way through everything you've done and now to be at Chainalysis. So let's talk a little bit about, you saw this world as a person who's been tracking stuff. So, there's a narrative out there that it's used for, something Kyle Hoffman likes to say, and he's on record as saying this, so I can repeat it, is, if you think a lot of fraud is done on blockchain, wait till you hear about this thing called cash. You're gonna freak out when I tell you about this thing called cash. So you as this, early FBI forensics programmer saw blockchain and said, "Oh, that's it." And Chainalysis is the leader in this. Or certainly one of the leaders, depending on how you look at it. I would say, the leader, certainly when we look at it. And, you said this is it. This is the way that the future is going to run all across the board.
Yep. I mean, the potential when you think about what blockchain can do, both for
What it
speed,
is
accuracy.
doing, what it
Yep.
is doing, Gurvis.
Yeah, what it really is already doing. But I mean, I'm still thinking about that
Oh,
larger scale implementation. Right
oh,
now we're dealing with this size. And I try to tell people, if you think blockchain is big now, just imagine what it's going to be in the future as we look at tokenizing assets to the real world,
oh.
and to grease the skids of commerce and frictionless transactions.
Oh, I mean, here at FinTech Meetup, we had so many discussions for so many different use cases. I think the difference is the last 4 or 5 years, I was at WEF a couple months back, and the last 4 or 5 years have been like, what is this thing? What is it going to do? And
Mm.
everybody now is like, oh my God, it's going to change the world. Here's
Right.
how we want to do it. Here's how we want to implement it. And we're seeing so much adoption across the board. And the
Yeah.
US was the latest to the game, maybe. It was kind of good because everybody was waiting for the US to move. And now that the US has made a move, we see that the vast swaths of the world just saying, all right, we were already ready. Let's just go ahead and do it. Or
Yeah.
we've already implemented something in a sandbox, turn it on, let's go.
Yep,
You
that's
know,
right.
it's it's crazy.
It's important when you're doing something to get your course corrected, right? If we were trying to do a rocket ship to the moon or Mars, right, we would spend a lot of time making sure we're aimed properly, right, and doing our checks to make sure everything's going right. But once you hit start and the rocket starts to fire, then you're moving and your acceleration just grows.
Yep.
I think it's an exciting time when you look at where we're going over the next several years as we've got this vector in place. And we used to do that in the Bureau. Sometimes the Bureau would be a little slow to the party on something, right? But once it got there, then it owned it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. No, and we've been working with, just like you guys still, I mean, you've got great connections, and we've made some great connections both with you guys and through you guys and then on our own. And I would say that you're what you just said is starting to happen across the board, right? Because the clarity has been, I mean, really it's kind of like the internet, where kind of the internet proliferated because it was allowed to. Sure, we went after the bad crimes that nobody should be doing, doing
Yeah.
things online that we shouldn't be doing. But, gambling and all those things kind of were just allowed to go, and that's what took the internet off. I mean, the early internet was, we could talk about what it was, but we don't have to. We know what it was, right? Early
Right.
internet. And that's what got these things going. So,
But there were
yeah.
pioneers early in that recognized the potential for
Oh,
e-commerce, of where that
oh,
was going to go. I mean, just have your listeners think about 10 years ago, how much when they got ready for the holidays did they buy online versus
oh,
5 years ago versus three versus two versus this past year, right?
yeah,
I,
yeah.
I can tell you my arc has changed personally. I mean, why wouldn't you? I always also tell people this interesting thing. So imagine a business model. If you're a company and you put out a catalog of goods and services that you can sell, a person looks at that catalog, orders it, and then it's sent to their house by mail. That's the business model of Sears Roebuck going
Yeah.
back 150 years ago.
Yeah,
You think,
exactly.
wait a minute, I've got a catalog, people order it, we pay, and then we mail it to their house. How in the world did a company who did that for over 100 years not
Lose.
recognize
Yeah.
what the internet was going to do to transform commerce? And something like Amazon comes along and dethrones that and owns that whole space. And there are yet to be the future Amazons and Netflix of the world that are going to do that in this industry. And that's why I always get excited talking with people like yourself who are pioneers and are peeking over the horizon about where commerce and access to finance is going to go.
Well, it's
But and,
funny
and
that
I
you
get involved because part of my job is to figure out you can't have trillions of dollars move into a new economy and not attract criminals and grifters and malign nation states who are going to try to get their piece.
right, exactly. Exactly. To that point though, this is the way we want to move. So let's do it. Let's move it all here because it's way better than the alternative right
Yeah,
now.
that's right.
You
You know,
know?
if I walk into a bank with $200 in cash, the bank has no way of knowing where that cash came from,
Or
right?
even when you send it to the next bank.
Right.
Nobody knows whose that account
No.
that is except for the other bank.
And
You
we
know?
accept those risks now. And banks work hard to try to do good KYC, know their transactions, and then monitor for illicit activity. With the blockchain, I mean, I tell people, you may not know who the subject of your investigation is today, but that data is still going to be there 5 years from now,
Yeah,
right? And so as
exactly.
we get greater attribution and transparency,
Yeah.
that data is always there. So, I would
Yeah.
much rather have the subject of one of my investigations using blockchain than any other form of value transfer.
Well, it's going to permeate every part of our digital lives. It's going to permeate down into, systems that are just like we didn't leave Web 1 behind when we went to Web 2. We're going
Yeah.
to have these systems that state check to public chains, private chains on top of private chains. It's just going to be data everywhere, right? And like you said, even if you can't make the put all the lines together immediately, maybe 2 3 years down the road, something comes back across and it's always there. You've
And
always
as
got it.
more of us come to the playing field, we densify the coverage and our capabilities grow exponentially for everybody.
Exponentially. Yep, exactly. Exactly. Well, we'll talk about some capabilities here in a little bit, but let's kind of talk about, I was in DC, you were just in you just flew out to
Southeast
Thailand
Asia.
and
Yep.
yep, yep. Um, we're seeing kind of from the regulators to the governments to the law enforcement all starting to really lean into this. Why don't you tell us a little bit of what you can about what you did while you were, kind of traveling over these last few weeks?
Sure. Well, in my job as global CTO for public sector, I work with partners in Europe, Central, South America, here in Northern America, and in APAC. So this was an APAC trip, and I went to both Indonesia and Thailand, for example, and we were meeting with public sector partners in both of those countries. There's a great emerging digital economy there in Southeast Asia, and in particularly those countries where, I mean, a lot of people don't realize Indonesia, for example, is the fourth most populous nation on the planet, right behind the United
Wow.
States. Right? There's
Wow.
281 million people in Indonesia,
I
spread
had no
across their,
idea.
yeah, it's a huge country, and these countries are just leapfrogging right into the digital
Leapfrogging.
economy.
Boom.
Yeah, because they all have one of these.
The spaceship, I call it the little everybody's got a little spaceship that can do things that, entire server farms 20 years ago were having trouble doing.
That's right. Yeah, and you think about the ability for e-commerce. I was talking with a friend the other day who just came back from India, and she was buying something on from a street vendor, and the street vendor was wanting to be paid digitally,
I know.
right?
I know. I think the argument that I hear from a lot of people is that, nobody can do digital. I was like, there Africa's been digital, like they
Yes,
leapfrog. Everybody has cell phones over there,
that's
Maybe
right.
not every single human, but enough to make digital like life easy, right?
Right.
And they're moving rapidly in that direction.
Yeah, and you think about the ability to do fractionalized ownership, just-in-time financing, micropayments. It really, in places where they have large inflationary pressures, currency devaluations, to be able to move to a stable coin or a digital form of payment
Oh,
that
oh.
allows for that cross-border fungibility. I mean, it gets exciting when you think about the potential for that
Well, let me
of
tell you. Let me
improving the
tell you
human
this.
condition.
in Harvard a few weeks ago, these kids came up with, we worked on it together and we pivoted into a peer-to-peer insurance platform for micro insurance in
Mm,
Africa.
wow.
Isn't that
Well,
amazing?
as exciting as all that is, to get back to that Southeast Asia, you can't have trillions of dollars moving into that and people beginning to transact and tokenize value without people thinking, hey, wait a minute, how can I get a portion of that? And
Right.
so applying those criminal techniques and malign state actors to think, hey, how can we exploit this for our benefit?
Yep.
And so you've got this convergence of an rapidly emerging digital economy with access to it by large populations. But unfortunately, their cyber awareness and the cyber protections that exist in that infrastructure need to improve because they're not keeping pace with that innovation and that desire,
Especially at the justice level, right? Like the
right?
enforcement level, the justice level, the government side of
Yeah, we've
things.
got to move at an even pace because what we get
Exactly.
is this imbalance, and
Yeah.
then their catch up is always hard. So that's part of what I do to go in, meet with these governments, find out what their problem sets are, look at what they're trying to do, and advise and consult. And of course, Chainalysis is the leading provider for blockchain intelligence. We're in over 70 countries, and we do just that. So it's exciting for me to kind of talk with these partners and see how they're uniquely tackling these challenges.
Oh, and that's a perfect segue into kind of what we were going to talk about next, which is how we've been working together
Yeah.
over the over the last, it's been about a year and a little over a year, I think that we've really been working together, and really more recently, much more deeply. The entire space is, in real, it's at a point where it's embracing. The movement to these systems, and a protection suite that we've been working on together is just one of the things that's, I think, of primary kind of goal for all of us to enable. And that's kind of what we're excited about, that we've been doing with Chainalysis, is
And our
pulling.
customers and the public deserve no less. We have got to move
Yep.
ahead of the threat, right? And be there to
Yep.
protect them before they click.
That's right. Before they click, slightly after they click,
Right.
give them the resources to track and recover, or have a team that's ready there to track and recover. We've been working with you guys on, just across the board, how to make that more efficient. We got some really cool stuff coming up. But, we're utilizing this to bring forth a new financial kind of evolution of these financial systems. We're taking you guys into a couple new countries. I think that you didn't mention EU. You guys don't have any in the
No,
EU?
absolutely we do.
Yeah,
In
yeah, of
fact,
course.
in fact, I was just in the EU a
Yep.
few months before that, and going back here very, very shortly. So, yeah, we spend a lot of time, and when you look at the adoption in Europe of crypto and how the volume of monies that are
Oh yeah.
moving out, it would be shocking. If people want to learn more about that, they can go to. We do a geo report every year that
Yep.
tracks the adoption of crypto, and we break it down by regions. And yeah, the adoption
Well,
in the Europe,
MICA, right? MICA, the countries got together, they came up with MICA, and that really helped
yeah,
leapfrog everything forward, you
yes,
know?
and
Um,
that's a good example of how government and regulation and compliance can come together with commerce and level.
Yep. Yep. And a good example of how, 19 countries or 20 countries can do it pretty quickly. That's a fairly substantial effort to get
Yes.
everybody on the same page. But they also had, I think the US with MTL laws could get to a more similar way to do this, since it is more transparent. It is something that, maybe there could be an exclusion for all 50 states that says, if you actually do it on a blockchain, then you can get a much simpler license or something like that, because it's easier to trace and track. But there's so much going on in the space right now. But we've really loved working with you guys, because you just have this, not just this really great technology, but you're a person, and your company, your culture is really about helping people at the end of the day.
I mean, our
And
tagline is building trust in blockchain. That's what we
yeah,
want.
that's
That's
what
what
you
we want
want.
to help.
That's what you want. And the core of that is to help people, right? To create safer economies and safer ecosystems and more resilient ecosystems. And you know, it's been great working with. We've got so many great partners, and you guys are at the top of the list right
Well, I
now.
mean, what you're doing to future-proof your platform, right? And not only protect your customers now, but looking over the horizon about where those threats are going to come from in the future, and how do you go ahead and secure these platforms in a way that customers can transact with confidence.
Yeah, and you know, even the financial institutions, right? So we're working with a few governments, we're working with a few like banking consortiums in countries. And you know, the first question is how do we know? Because a lot of them are, you know, they in Latin America, a lot of importer exporter
Yeah.
countries, right? And they're starting transactions in stablecoin and other assets, right? And they need to be able to off ramp it, but they want to keep the bank and the liquidity and the people bringing money in and out. They want to track where it's from, you know. So we use Chainalysis, and when we show them what the capabilities are with Chainalysis, with what we built around you guys, and our own tools that we've plugged in and put alongside it, you know, they're just really it creates this like, wow, we never knew that this level of compliance and tracing and trackability existed. And the way we're putting it in the hands of people, right, with precognitive kind of pre-adjudicative action, right, it's really amazing. It's really incredible.
Well, the data shows exactly that. I mean, Latin America and Sub-Saharan Africa are the fastest growing regions for retail and professional size stable coin transfers. I mean,
Yep,
their year over year growth is exceeding 40%.
I know. We just
Eastern
signed an
Asia,
African credit union.
yeah, Eastern Asia and Eastern Europe are following closely with 32 and 29%. So those areas we're seeing rapid adoption, and they're doing some really innovative things.
They are, and it all you know, this is kind of along with you guys has what's been able, and a couple, like I said, a couple of our other partners, to get those footholds to prove that these systems are as robust and resilient as they need to be, more so than anything that's ever existed in the history of humanity. And these things are growing, and it is amazing. Like we went to Africa House in um WEF last. Do you guys go to the World Economic Forum?
Yes.
Okay. Do you guys have a like a your own building or your own spot there?
You know, I don't know, but I remember talking a while back with some of our colleagues who were engaging with them.
So, you know, we are doing a what we're calling last year the Reuters, Stimson Center, and a couple other kind of big names. Man, they brought in some amazing speakers. We're going to do the Co-op House this year in
Mm,
Davos. We've already got the World Organization of Credit Unions, the African SACCOs, which are like savings and credit union banks, people banks, all over Latin America. It already had Greece was a part of it. We had Azerbaijan was a part of
uh-huh.
it, and now we're growing that this year. Maybe we can get Chainalysis to come down there and be a
Well,
part of that one.
yeah, I know Jonathan was recently at Davos, and you
Cool.
know we take a great interest to see how this technology is getting implemented, because it's one thing to talk about it in theory, it's another thing to see how it actually gets implemented, and being able to drive that adoption in responsible ways. And keep up with the pace of innovation is always a challenge and something that's exciting and motivating.
Yeah, exactly. That is motivating, right? Because it is a new challenge. A lot of the times it's evolving so rapidly, so there's always new challenges to be solved. What are some of those new challenges that you guys are seeing that are coming up that are on your radar and that you can share with us, of course, today?
Yeah.
But I think people would love to kind of hear what you guys are working on and what you see as kind of the near-term future.
Well, obviously, we spend a lot of time looking at the illicit use of crypto, how crypto is being used by bad actors, both individual cyber and criminal actors, all the way to transnational organized criminal groups who are running large scale fraud and scams call centers, for
Yeah.
example, how violent crime is emerging. You know, back in the day when I started, and you think about cryptocurrency blockchain analytics was typically relegated to the elite cyber units in a law enforcement agency. No longer that is the case.
Yeah.
Crypto is finding its way into all crime types. Why? Because that's value transfer.
Yeah.
And one of the primary reasons crimes are committed is for money. You got
Yeah.
money and passion, right? And oftentimes those two things get combined. And so we see it on human trafficking, gambling, money laundering, violent crime, and more. So we spend a lot of time studying the illicit use of crypto, identifying those trends, where it's emerging, how it's changing year over year. Of course, you always have underreporting. That's the same with any kind of crime. You never
Yeah.
get the
Yeah.
full
Yeah.
scope of it, but by studying it year over year and in applying consistent and reliable methodologies, you can get a feel for how things are changing, right? So we do spend a lot of time about that. And then more importantly, how do we transfer that knowledge back to law enforcement, regulators, public policy individuals so that they can write and frame the environment to discourage that behavior? And then we spend a lot of time, like what I'm doing here with you today, in with the finance community so that they can position themselves to stop it, because better prevention is always better than reaction and investigation. And
Exactly.
you've got to do both
Exactly.
sides, obviously.
Exactly. So let's talk about that a little bit. Like from the financial institution side, I'm interested what you're seeing as far as interest, adoption,
Yeah.
how do they see it? There's been kind of you know, it felt like it's been 50-50, but what are you feeling? Is it shifting?
Yeah, it is shifting. I mean, and why? Because the money is driving that, right?
Yeah.
As we see more and more global crypto adoption, more and more of these institutions are realizing, hey, this is an area we want to expand our services in. And if we're going to do it, we've got to do it reasonably. So we're seeing greater KYC, right? Especially as you look sanctions and other actions being taken by regulators, both here in the US and around the world, it's driving that positive behavior. So you're seeing a strengthening of know your customer, KYC. You're also seeing a strengthening of know your transaction, or being able to do that granular level transaction monitoring, both to detect illicit behavior patterns based on trends and data that people like us can help provide, but also what they're doing internally. And so you're beginning to see better risk profiles being created, using alerting systems, because as you know, in this world, it moves at the speed of crypto,
Yeah.
and which is significantly faster than traditional finance. So
Yeah.
you've got to be on your game, which means you've got to have these decision matrix already in place to identify risky transaction activity.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So talk about some of those things that you guys are doing, explain some of those um kind of tooling sets a little bit deeper. I know that because we talk with our credit unions a lot, and I think it'd be great to hear it from you since you built the earliest versions of this back in the 90s. Um, yeah, talk about Reactor, talk about some of your KYT, KYW features. We integrate with all that, but I think hearing a little bit more about it from you would really help understand a little bit deeper into what's really going on here.
Yeah, happy to. So first off, you have to establish, what does normal look like? What does
Hmm.
abnormal look like? Because if you don't know what normal looks like, it's difficult to distinguish from abnormal. So we spend a lot of time walking through the blockchain and mapping it, right? We cluster transactions. We help to identify, oh, this is likely associated with an exchange. This wallet has exposure to an illicit activity of this flavor or variety, whether it be online gambling, mixers, or child exploitation material, whatever the case may be. So we spend a lot of time mapping, tagging, and clustering. That way, when a financial institution, an exchange, or some type of a risk entity is trying to look at the exposure that onboarding funds from a particular wallet or group of wallets, they can better assess that risk. So we spend a lot of time on data quality. You will find that we not only have a massive amount of data that goes back many, many, many years, but we also spend a lot of time on the quality of that data, because we know individuals and organizations will be making decisions based on that data. So we spend a lot of time on data accuracy. So for example, your credit union, your customers, if they're using our service, they're not only going to have a depth of coverage across many chains and tokens, but they're also going to be able to have good granular level detail. And from that,
Exactly.
you begin to build good KYC and KYT risk profiles and protocols. So
Exactly.
using our data, they can improve their internal policies and their procedures. They can do that to reduce their future risky activity on their platform. I mean, better if you can avoid onboarding that risk in the first place through good intelligence. Or
Well, exactly.
if a behavior begins to go sideways on you, right now you can detect it early on before it begins to go
Exactly.
sideways and generate those suspicious activity reports to begin to inoculate and isolate that risk.
Right, right. And then share data on it, right? And
Yeah.
that's what I think is the most interesting concept in blockchain and really what Chainalysis does with the data you were talking about. I mean, the other interesting thing you said, it goes back many years, but really some of your data is blockchain data. It goes back till the beginning of time
Yeah,
of the blockchain.
that's
And
right.
so as to come back to your point earlier about maybe in a year some new cluster pops up and you're able to connect something. Now all of a sudden you just saw and then you saw a new case has been solved,
Right.
right?
Yeah,
So
because we
that's
can link old with new.
exactly, exactly.
And
So
unless you
that's
have that data, you can't do it.
exactly, exactly. And that's one of the most powerful toolings, to go to your point about the KYT and the KYW, we've seen where people were getting pig butchered or they were getting social engineered and we were able to, and then when we look into it, we looked into, we can go as deep as the letting the financial institutions know that, hey, look, there's, you might want to help your member, and then we found out that we caught it faster than they sent money people are sending money everywhere, and we were able to quickly hone in, due to the kind of set of tools we built with you guys and on top of you guys. And it's just, you can't do that kind of stuff. The financial institutions sometimes don't even know, and we're able to tell them. Isn't that crazy?
It is, and it's wonderful. In many of these scams and schemes, the money bleeds out in portions. So the sooner you can detect it,
Exactly.
maybe 5,000's already gone out the door, or 10,000's gone out the door. And in some cases, we've got where rapid action even recovers that 5 or 10. But that
Exactly.
5 or 10 left unaddressed is going to turn into 50 or 100 or 250. And so imagine, I mean, just think about it in the house. The sooner you detect a leaky faucet or a leaky drain, the sooner you're going to save your house. Left unattended, that's going to flood the sink, flood the floor, and your kitchen's going into your basement. So, it's the same thing in this principle here. Early detection is your best friend. And if you've got the right data and tools and you set those up, you stand a good chance of finding it. Certainly a better
Absolutely.
chance.
Absolutely. And I think like you mentioned rapid response in there. That's another thing that's actually over the last, call it 8 months, we've been
Mhm.
really honed in on, and we've gotten just with a combination of you guys and law enforcement around the world. It's just getting really, yeah, I think that you said it's exponentially maturing, right?
Yeah.
The capabilities are maturing exponentially. So it's just been
Imagine if your local firefighters, when you call and say, "Hey, I've got a fire starting in my house," like, well, we'll be out next Thursday and we'll assess the damage. Like, whoa, hold on a second, right? I mean, you want them there as soon as possible so that the kitchen fire stays in the kitchen.
exactly, exactly. And that's what, I mean, some of the reasons why we use some of the chains we do is, like Hedera, we're about to jump on Ripple. There's capabilities being built now to have tokens where they're KYC'd and you can't off ramp them unless you're part of an ecosystem, and there's multi-factor authentication built into the layers of the blockchain. I mean, it is rapidly transforming into this really wonderful, great place to be. But again, it still needs all this stuff because invariably there will be those times where things happen that
Right.
shouldn't
And
happen.
the further we can isolate this bad behavior and make it more and more difficult for them to off ramp their stolen proceeds and work with exchanges and these institutions to claw that back, that's great for victim. I mean, there are people listening that
Yep.
will listen to today's broadcast. They will work to implement blockchain solutions that are literally going to save lives. We
Yep.
haven't even talked about the rampant problem of
Oh.
sextortion, where
Oh yeah.
crypto is being used as the payment rails for this. I mean, I talked with a law enforcement officer recently who got involved on a sextortion case. And for your listeners who may not know, this is where an individual will befriend another, oftentimes pretending to be someone that they would be interested in romantically, only to then
Like
induce
Brad
them,
Pitt, like that Brad Pitt deal.
and yeah, and induce them to send intimate images of themselves, only to find out that they're not who they say they were. And then they say, if you don't pay me this ransom, I'm going to share all of photos with your friends, family, your coach, your parents, whatever. And so they begin extorting them for micropayments. And it leads to great harm. And sometimes these people take their own lives. I was talking with a law enforcement officer recently who got involved in one of these cases, started pulling the thread of these small transactions, only to find out a huge network of other victims, many of which had never come forward, and one of which was planning to harm themselves. And had they not intervened, probably would have. So these things have real life consequences that go far beyond dollars stolen. They
And
destroy lives.
without blockchain, you can't justify. So even as a former FBI, it still must have been hard to get that data from all these there's 10,000 financial institutions, right?
Yeah.
You can't get all the data and comb through it in the same way and normalize it and get the kind of insights you want out of it. It's just too siloed, you know?
Right. And then much less if it hops overseas.
Oh,
Now I've got
oh,
to use
oh,
mutual legal
forget about
assistance
it.
treaties to do that. And what's the latency delay that that's going to take, even if it's a cooperative government?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So yeah, I think it's great. I think it's really great. We've seen some great work by a lot of the law enforcement agencies now on this too. So the cooperation worldwide is really picking up. Are you seeing the same thing? Do you see the world coming together and rallying around these decentralized, cooperative, new economic, cooperative capitalistic ecosystems?
Yeah, I do. I mean, and the technology is really driving that because they realize no single agency can do this work alone. No single
Exactly.
company can do this alone. It takes partnerships and it takes data sharing and collaboration, cooperation. And you've got to be able to, again, move at the speed of these investigations. I used to say that because I worked counterterrorism for a good bit of my career, the time to meet your partner is not while you're both standing around looking into the crater, right? You have
Right.
got to do that work up front so that hopefully you will never have to stand around the perimeter of a crater, because you've done that collaboration, you've done that real time intelligence sharing, both of trends, of best practices, and these cases, because one
Yeah.
victim may be in victims may be in multiple jurisdictions. And if you're sharing that information, you have a chance of linking together these small disparate activities into a larger scheme.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's like when you have these abilities to link all this together, like you mentioned the technology. AI is going to exponentially
Yes.
increase our ability to share data in an unstructured format and gain intelligence from it, right? Like the problem before was like even the simplest problem of translation, right?
Hmm. Yep.
Just think about 10, 15 years ago getting a translated document. AIs can do that now, right? They can read two disparate documents and then compare them and give you a summary
Right.
in
I mean,
a few
imagine if
seconds.
I'm having to read a blog site in Russian, and they're talking about whatever it is that might be of value, the latency delay. But with AI, you can make leapfrogs. I mean, recently
And
Chainalysis.
blockchain and AI on blockchain, it's
Absolutely. I mean, I like to say we can no longer be satisfied with, improvements of 30%, 40%, 50%, even 100%. We have got to be able to make logarithmic, exponential improvements in our capabilities. What was it? A little over a year ago, the former director of the FBI, Director Wray, was testifying before Congress in January of 2024. And he said, if we took everybody in the FBI who works cyber, and the Bureau has a significant cyber footprint, as you might imagine. He said if we took everybody that works cyber in the FBI and focused them just on the threat from China, we would still be outnumbered 50-1,
wow.
right? I mean, and that's just one threat actor.
Yeah.
So what we have got to, and I say we in industry, you in finance, we who support public safety and wanting to make it better for our customers, our neighbors, our families, we've got to come up with solutions that provide leapfrogs so that one day one investigator can do the work of 50 or 100 or maybe even 1,000. And these machine assisted toolings, we used to say when I was at the Bureau, machine postulated, human validated. And we've got to find ways that empower them to do that, especially as we look to leaning government functions.
Well, that's exactly how, some of the systems we've built with you guys and some of our future systems that are coming up work, right?
Yeah.
We utilize AI, we utilize blockchain, we utilize Chainalysis, we analyze things. We have systems that are pinged by Chainalysis, for example, that do other analysis and then present either users or team members or employees with data that they can act on, right? And in some cases, even taking the liberties of acting on behalf of, right, to do certain activities. Like if we've turned on a trace on an account because we know now it's been identified, right? We can
Yeah.
have it take action instead of just notifying, because now we've put it into a method of, hey, just let us know whenever something moves in here and make the report.
And that's so important. If you've already got your established business processes that have been vetted and proven, then you can begin to machine a lot of those activities, right? And accelerate the adoption. I mean, Chainalysis recognizes where that's going. We recently acquired Hexagate, which is a
Yep.
leading provider of Web3 security solutions. And it's going to allow us to be able to combine our intelligence of blockchain with real-time threat and including cyber exploits and hacks.
Yep.
I mean,
Yep.
Hexagate, prior to us acquiring them, had already saved their customers more than $1 billion in customer funds. We also then acquired Altera, right, which has AI-powered fraud detection solutions. And
Yep.
we're going to combine all of those things,
Yep.
and you're going to see significant enhancement in our capabilities. I mean, Altera, before we acquired them, had already detected about $10 billion worth of money sent to
Wow.
scams. We're going to combine
Wow.
all of these capabilities together and create an even more powerful blockchain intelligence tool for banks, finance, and governments to start to put the squeeze further on these bad actors and
No, it's
drive them
it's
out of the marketplace.
it's so amazing because right now we're working on some really amazing, decentralized AI, capabilities, user front end capabilities, and pairing the two technologies together is going to give us capabilities that are just unbelievably more responsive, proactive, intuitive than anything we've ever seen.
And that's why partnerships with you all are so important, because hand in glove, we can do this together. And it creates this net and ecosystem of partners who are reinforcing each other to squeeze the bad guys while at the same time facilitating legitimate commerce. Because, while
Yep.
we've spent a good bit of time talking about how bad guys are exploiting this commerce rail, our data shows and the blockchain indicates the vast majority of blockchain and crypto is for lawful and legitimate purposes. I
Exactly.
don't know that there's any
Exactly.
other
Way
payment
way
rail,
more than exactly. Way
way,
more than any other payment rail. Exactly.
way more by a significant margin.
Yep.
That being said, we're not satisfied. We
Yeah,
want this to be
exactly.
the safest form of commerce that exists, where you combine speed with low cost, high trust.
Exactly. Exactly. No, that's exactly right. Right. Distributed systems that can't be censored or manipulated. Exactly. That's what we're here for.
And
Man,
and
this is
I'm excited to see how this grows far beyond just tokenized value of money objects, stable coins and the like, where my medical records are protected with blockchain technology, where I get to decide what piece or portion of my personal data I want to share with you. I have a smart contract capability to take it back when those criteria are no longer applicable.
well, with
Um,
zero knowledge proof, with that and the combination of zero knowledge proofs, you may not even have to share some of this
right.
data in the future, right? Like they could ask you if you have this, and you could respond back, "Yes, I have this," because the zero knowledge proof
Yes.
mechanism. It's
Yeah,
just
and
a
so we're even
fantastic
limiting in
new
that
world.
instance what's being exchanged.
Yeah,
It's just powerful
yeah.
to think about where that's going. Now, we also have to, as rosy and wonderful as that is, persons like myself and others at Chainalysis and you in the industry have to think about, okay, how could I exploit that? And how could
Yep,
I steal that? How could
yep.
I leverage that for my illicit purposes? So, with every good
Exactly.
comes, the potential bad, but you got to think like a criminal sometimes to catch a criminal.
And you got to innovate at the same time, right? And
Yes,
in
you got to out
innovation,
innovate them.
you got to out innovate them. That's exactly right. You got to out innovate them, and that's the scepter that we have all taken up.
We used to say, on some of these targets of our investigations, I think, if these people would just spend the same energy towards trying to create instead of destroy, what could they accomplish?
Oh my God.
Um, you
Oh my
know.
God.
Anyway,
It's incredible. It's incredible. Um, but man, Gurvis, what an incredible discussion this has been. I've got to head out to the airport. I'm in Vegas. You just got back from traveling. I am traveling, so I need to head out. But this has been just so incredible. We are so grateful for everything you have personally done and Chainalysis has done for us. And we are so excited about the future with you guys and everything you're doing and we're doing together. So thank you so much for coming on today. I wanna ask you one last question. This is how we typically end it: is if you had to leave our community with one piece of advice, that could be for financial institutions, just consumers, businesses, whatever, what would it be?
this applies to financial institutions, consumers, and public sector.
Perfect.
Speed is your very best friend and your worst enemy. When you're dealing with blockchain intelligence, if you can match speed with accuracy, you can really make a difference. Speed is your best friend. It's also your worst enemy because if you're not on your game and if you're not prepared, you're going to lose. But if you are, you're going to win, and so will your customers.
And we're winning. So thank you so much for helping us win, Gervis. This has been fantastic. And we'll be talking again very, very soon.
Good to see you. Safe travels.
Yes, sir. You too.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.